Oh man, good liquor is best enjoyed under the open firmament. Anyways, my heart yearneth for the dusky company of my own emancipated people. I'm Eddie Webb.
And I'm Chris Spivey.
And today we're going to talk about Buck and the Preacher here on Genreless. Hello and welcome to another episode of our Western run on Genreless. This is our 12th episode, I think.
I thought it was lucky number 13. I don't know. I don't keep up the numbers.
Maybe. Yeah, fair enough. Suffice to say, I've been still enjoying it, and this is another bump on that road. And not bump, another stop on that road, I should say.
Did you just give a spoiler, Eddie? 4 seconds in? Is that what just happened? What happened to I'm going to reserve my judgment to the end of the episode and not let people know?
I don't know if you've noticed, Chris, but I do what I want. Sometimes I just start by saying what I like, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I feel like reserving my judgment, and sometimes I don't.
Man, like you're just bucking the system, doing it how you want, El Topo style.
Yeah, I think you're preaching to the choir.
Any chance for me to talk about El Topo? Because you always get happy when I do.
I know. El Topo is a thing that exists, yes. I mean, but like honestly, like even though we have had a very long string of me going, nope, I haven't seen that movie, I have heard of Buck and the Preacher, right? So like this is up there with High Noon in terms of Westerns I have heard of because they're so well known that even people who aren't necessarily into Westerns know these things.
Huh. I didn't think I was going to go here this early, but funnily enough that you mentioned that, it's like you set me up for this. My wife's parents came down for this weekend, and I mentioned to my father-in-law that, I'm showing my buddy Eddie a whole bunch of Westerns. He's never been like a big Western fan on the whole. And he got super excited because he's a big Western fan. And he's like, so what are you showing him? Like, and it's me. So I said, I showed him El Topo to look at his face. And he's like, I don't know what that is. It's like, oh, I knew it. And I was like, and then I was like, so I showed him a bunch of other stuff, like with Henry Fonda, like the Oxbow incident, and he got super excited. And then he was like, so which John Wayne movies are you showing him? It's like, I showed him Stagecoach because it's John Ford and had to like set the groundwork for it. And this week we're going to be talking about Buck and the Preacher, and he had no idea what the Buck and the Preacher was. Stared at me into stared at me and behind me into the long distance.
Really?
So you're saying people know this movie, Eddie. This movie is phenomenal. Shock that I like this movie. But it is an underrated, mostly forgotten gem that only recently, I think, had a Criterion edition come out in 2024, 2023.
Wow. I don't know where because I know I've heard this movie before we talked about it. Before, I mean, I knew the movie existed before we were even friends, right? So like, I genuinely thought like, oh, this is one of those things that most Western fans know about. How in the hell did I come across this movie then? That's wild.
I don't know. I am impressed by that, but to show you what like a big Western fan doesn't know about this movie.
You know what? I think maybe the reason why I came across it is because it is Sidney Poitier's first film as a director. That might be where I came across it rather than from the Western perspective. But still, that is wild.
To counterbalance that.
Yeah.
One more bit, then I'll let you go. To counterbalance that, while I was watching it, sometimes we exchange like a random photo if we're watching something to prove to the person that we're watching it. Essentially, is what it boils down to. But I didn't do it this time because I watched this yesterday. I took one still of Ruby D and I shot it over to a friend of the podcast, Ariel. I didn't say anything else about it. It's like, and she's like, "Is that fucking Ruby D?" I was like, "Yes, it is." And then she came back, "Is that?" And she knew like the movie right away. Nice. And she doesn't like Westerns.
Okay, so it's not just me. That's good. But what's interesting is that you mentioned that it's getting kind of a critical reappraisal. And because we're now at a point of our chronology where there are still people alive who remember making the movies, but there's still not a lot of hard evidence outside of their memories about the making of the movies, so things get pretty muddled at this stage. In my research, Poitier said the movie was not an immediate financial success. And he said it only broke even at the box office. It was made on $2 million. So it was still like an expensive film, but he said it broke even. And there are rumors that he lost his film deal with Columbia Pictures as a result of the poor performance of this film. But Philip Powers wrote a book in 2020 about Sidney Poitier and his career, and this is a whole chapter devoted to Buck and the Preacher. And the attendance records in theaters show that millions of people watched this film. So the fairly modern discourse around it is, did the studios lie to Poitier about the financial success of this movie?
I would say yes.
It strikes me that's a strong possibility.
Considering some of the story about him, this being his first directorial movie, is that he and Harry Belafonte essentially decided the other director wasn't shooting the movie properly, from my understanding, and they had to let him go. You know that story, right?
No, I didn't actually.
So they had I forgot his name now, but a semi-famous white director. He was going to direct the film. He was there for maybe 3 or 4 days. And they sort of came to him and saying, you're shooting this like a standard Western, and someone, I forgot, the guy who plays the lead bad guy, essentially said he came out and he was shooting it like we're shooting it for TV, not cinematic. Poitier came out and said he was shooting it in a way that it wasn't going to be compelling for Black people to watch because he wasn't highlighting them as characters. And Harry Belafonte said they needed a Black director to shoot the film. Essentially, they all had different versions of the same story. And they let that director go, and Sidney Poitier sort of stepped into the role. I think some of the stuff I remember reading said it was his girlfriend / to-be wife at the time that gave him the extra impetus to do it. Some people just said that he stepped in the role. Some people said Harry Belafonte gave him the push to do it. But either way, he took over directing, and he directed, I want to say, the movie in 45 days.
That's insanely fast.
And he did the editing and stuff for the film essentially at night because he was shooting The Organization during the day. The Organization is the third Virgil Tibbs film.
Oh, okay. Wow. So this is very much a passion project for him.
Yeah, for both Belafonte and him, because I think it was Belafonte was part of the Belafonte's company was part of the production people. Are you curious why you have this movie and I am not the person that knows the research for it? Are you curious about that?
I mean, a bit. Well, I mean, not really, because I don't know any of these films, so I'm always going to, just by the nature of how we do this process, you're going to know more about these films than I do. So I mean, I'm not that surprised. But is there another reason why you assigned this film specifically to me?
I signed it to you instead of me because I would fall down a research hole and go on a big thing about X-adjusters and everything else. And I figured this would give me a chance to let Eddie take point and to have you research into a movie that I really like that's about Black cowboys, that essentially is the first real movie by a Black director. The writer of the script, I think, is white, but a Black director, primarily Black cast, that deals with the Black people and the indigenous nations, sort of that weird, delicate balance that they were having to dance and all of that, and let you dive into it. Part of it's me and my love of history wanting you to enjoy it because I knew that you like history too.
I did, and this was a part of history that I vaguely knew about because, let's be honest, a lot of, well, these days American history is even worse, but even when I was growing up, American history kind of goes, you get to the American Revolution, then you stop, nothing happens until the American Civil War, then the American Civil War happens, then you stop, and then nothing really happens until the First World War, right? It's all of our history is taught around wars.
Yeah.
And so I knew logically there was a period after the Civil War where all the people who were no longer slaves were allegedly given lands, and able to settle. And as I got older, allegedly became more and more of a load-bearing word as I learned more and more about how history actually worked. To we had this point where basically the movie strip says, yeah, they got lied to.
Yeah. So that night I made you cover El Topo, so I figured to give you a really good movie to cover,
which I appreciate. And again, I'm glad we're doing things this way, and I'm watching this stuff with this knowledge, because like I was able to watch this and see how this is kind of a synthesis of some of the different takes on Westerns that are coming from the spaghetti Westerns from Italian directors, but it's still very much shot and paced like a Ford film, right?
Mm-hmm.
This the sweeping vistas, the strong focus on characters, the insular communities and the challenges they have, all very Fordian. But the shifting focus onto the black settlers and Native Americans, and the role of racism even after racism was quote unquote solved, felt very much something coming from the Italian and European films that we were watching. So it does feel like a natural synthesis of those two trajectories.
Because this is a straight up revisionist Western. It's not an acid Western. It's not a psychological Western, kind of how like the Oxbow was a psychological Western from the 40s, wherever it was. This is a revisionist Western focused on marginalized groups, and it has a lot more gray and ambiguity in it.
Right.
There's a bit of a blaxploitation in it too, in case people are curious.
Yes.
A smidge. Well, not a lot, just a smidge.
Well, that was something else interesting. Is like, yeah. I mean, one thing we didn't do in this run, but we've done in the past, is that we've seen a few blaxploitation films on the Patreon side, and so I'm seeing, like I said, that I feel like there's the Poitier influence and the Belafonte influence, and I feel like it's kind of in my head how it breaks down. It's like I can see the parts where like this is Sydney's has a little bit of fun in the film, and this is like I could see Belafonte's putting a little blaxploitation into things a bit, right? I could see kind of like not quite a divide, but I could see like where the film kind of slightly shifts focus just a touch, which I like. But the other thing was interesting to me was, because this is right after Red Sun in our watch history, how the dynamics of the two leads in Red Sun and how the dynamics of two leads in this movie struck me as parallel.
Yeah.
Because both of them have an honorable character who wants to do the right thing but is slightly rigid in his moral code, versus the trickster who's on the outskirts of the law and is willing to bend and break the law to their own benefit, but they still have a heart of gold. The character trajectories are very different, but both films, about the middle point of the film, the relationship starts to gel, and you see how the characters starting to shift based on how they influence each other. Felt very similar to Red Sun in that regard.
I can see that. Though I would say that Preacher here is, I wouldn't say heart of gold. Preacher would have, I'm not going to give a spoiler, but just note, he doesn't necessarily have a whole bunch of altruism, but has a little bit. We'll leave it at that.
Right. No, there is. Well, I think that's because the focus is slightly shifted, right? One of the things that we talked about was like, for all of Red Sun's inclusivity, ultimately the white man was the center of that film. It's just white man in that case was the trickster type we're talking about. So he's the one who gets the character arc. Whereas this one, those respective roles are flipped. It's Poitier's character that is the kind of the center of the film. So he's going to have more of an arc than necessarily the Preacher will. But still, there's a lot of similarities. Again, watching those films back to back, it's like, oh, I'm seeing very similar vibes. And again, I'm seeing the I keep saying 40, but I mean, I feel like it's very appropriate, like that classic Western aesthetic,
landscape,
but with these modern ideas. Yeah. It feels like a big budget Western film, even though in 1972 it's only $2 million, which is not a ton of money for a 70s film.
But let's
I mean, it's no Shaft. It's not made up like $50, and yeah, I mean.
Thinking about it from the perspective of like the primarily white studios at the time, giving any money to a film centered around black people is a huge monumental thing. Like, from my understanding,
that's fair.
When they switched out directors, one of the stories I read is that they essentially tricked Columbia Pictures. They're like, so Sidney is going to step in, because, Sidney Poitier are buddies, so I say Sidney. Right. Sidney steps in He's just going to be there temporarily till we get a new director.
Right.
And
the
studio
never get a new director. Yeah.
And then they never went and got a new director. And about the time Columbia Pictures realized that they were almost done, and it's like we'd have to reshoot just about everything.
Which is another potential reason why maybe he did it in 45 days. Because maybe been quicker to get it done before the studio notices.
But I also heard that like people thought that he was an amazing director. Like the first day or so was rough, but then he like found his groove, and everyone was like in sync with what he was doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So as we mentioned, like cultural perspective in the film seems to have shifted. It looks like in the day, contemporarily, critics were split. It wasn't universally negatively banned by any stretch of the imagination. But my impression is that a lot of the contemporary critics were more taken by Poitier rather than necessarily the film itself. Because his star was, it wasn't on the rise. He was a well-established star at that point in time. But I think he was still considered to be a hot commodity. Oh, was on the decline? Okay.
Because I think at this point in time, it was, all right. I'm not going to go into all of it, but Sidney Poitier was a phenomenal person, but other people had expectations about the roles and things he should be doing and how he should be acting. And he had primarily been cast as being the perfect black man, essentially, for most of his roles, which we've seen to some extent. And so there was a lot of pushback from different people saying that's not the stereotype he should be trying to present, but like a more richer character.
Right.
And there was lots of conversations about that. And a lot of this movie happened 72, kind of after some of the civil rights movement stuff too. So there are a lot of influences there. Some of the critics, I'm trying to remember the timing, but they compared part of Buck and the Preacher's dynamic to that of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. So there were some comparisons people made between those two. And so part of it is, I think Poitier knew that he wouldn't necessarily be getting he would not continue to receive a lot of leading man roles because he was getting it older and older.
Okay.
So decline might not have been the right word, but it was trying to refocus. Yes.
Okay. Well, then that does track more with what I was reading, because like again, it's hard to actually get a lot of critics' responses, but it does seem like it erred on the side of, if they liked the movie, it was on the level of it's interesting to see Sidney Poitier doing something different, right? Even though I think it's more about him being a director than necessarily his kind of role he's playing. Although I do feel like his role is richer here. But nowadays, it seemed much more positively. Rotten Tomato has it at 84%, and the consensus is basically that his directorial debut is extremely solid. It's not like massively innovative, but because it is that black perspective on classic tropes, that adds a lot of excitement and invigoration to. In the 70s was a declining genre.
So I see the classic tropes are easy to associate with in the film, but at the same time, it is telling a story that had not been told, addressing a lot of conversational topics that people have actively tried to bury for a long time. And for them to take that on, that is phenomenal and groundbreaking in and of itself. In the 70s, even especially fucking now, that'd be phenomenal. Unbelievably phenomenal.
Right. No, I agree. I'm just going by what Rotten Tomatoes has said. I do see, again, because you've given me a bit more of a background to be able to talk about these things. I could see where they're saying classic Western tropes, and what they're really saying is, well, I was saying before, like Fordian style cinematography. So like it feels like a traditional 50s Western film. Even though the structure and content are actually pretty distinct. Because I do agree with you, like, unless you boil it down to a super reductive level of like, it is about a man who is taking revenge against bandits, that's about the only classic thing about it. But everything else is like, it is very much on its head, doing different things with these beats.
This is the third time acting that Sidney Poitier and Ruby Dee had been acted as a married couple. So I thought that was pretty interesting, which to some extent, you can tell in the movie because they seem to have like an instant chemistry given her smaller role in the film, but it's there immediately when you see it. So I think that helps based on that association. And I know that Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier had been like near lifelong friends. Like they were friends for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, something we talked about in a previous film is that at this point in time, there just weren't many black actors in Hollywood. So a lot of them knew each other because it was just a small pool. Not like a tiny amount, but like you said, like well, where I was going with this is that I definitely felt like watching this that these were actors who were very comfortable with each other. So I may be misremembering that the reason why is because they knew each other because it was a relatively small community of black actors, but certainly the fact that the three core leads knew each other did come across on screen.
I like if I may be speaking for you incorrectly, but is it that I think you meant, and this is how I'm taking it, so please correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
There weren't a lot of black actor and actresses that got to be leads in movies and things. They're primarily put in the background scenes because there would be a. So I'm thinking like that is a level of clarity that I'm trying to like.
Right. But my understanding when you were talking to me a bit about kind of the culture of Hollywood, particularly like in the 60s and 50s, was that as a result, a lot of times they shared information because there was a dearth of roles. And they would be like, hey, trying out for this, or they'd see each other at auditions because they were all kind of in the same community. And so got to know each other.
Correct. So, all right, let's rephrase it. There were not a lot of, essentially, I know we're equivocating, but I think it's important to establish.
It's good to clarify these things.
That there were not a lot of black actors and actresses that got hired. Because saying it otherwise makes it feels like there weren't a lot of them out there, so Hollywood couldn't hire black people because they didn't have
okay, that was no.
I want to make sure that
saying. No. It was much more. There was
they minimized black roles, so they couldn't have as many black people on screen, essentially.
Right, and so
black stories they stole and turned to white characters.
Right, and so when they would have roles actually for black people, a lot of them would show up, and therefore they would get to know each other because they were all going to these big casting things and whatnot, and go to like events and see each other. So it was a tighter community, is what the impression I got. So.
So I wanted to clarify that to make sure.
I appreciate that. No, it's good. Yeah, because I definitely didn't mean like, oh no, there's like 12 of them and no one, so they couldn't hire them if they wanted to. No, definitely not what I was thinking.
Cool. So yeah, if you want, we could banter back and forth. We could move into the movie. It's up to you.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. Because I mean, I did kind of focus on. I didn't get as much into the how it was made thing because I figured you would know a lot more about that than I would. So I was focusing more on like how was it received, because again, I came in with the false assumption of like, oh, this is a well-known film, so I don't have to do a ton of that because everyone, oh, it's Back to the Future, everyone knows it. But it turns out I'm wrong, which is wild to me because like, how do people not know this movie exists, but everyone's like, oh yeah, Django Unchained is this great black Western film. It's like, what?
I think without this movie, there wouldn't be a Django Unchained. There would not be the harder they fall. But before we jump into it, I guess a couple quick points. Civil War ended. The America won. They beat the Confederate traitors. Unfortunately, Johnson becomes president, which Johnson is a Southern sympathizer, and originally there was a plan for Reconstruction, which would free all the enslaved people, and then they created like the Freedmen's Bureau to help have enslaved people get educations and everything else, and they are like essentially ended slavery. The South, on the other hand, said, all right, so you've ended enslavement, let's create the prison system. And we're going to essentially pay people, and I use pay as in finger quotes. Essentially, we're going to pay them in my plantation script to some extent to work on my plantation, where they can only spend those scripts to me at a reductive rate. So essentially another form of enslavement for people that wouldn't leave. Then you had a bunch of black people. I'm truncating a whole bunch of history down to very simple terms before we move on with the show. Had a whole bunch of black people say, fuck this. And they became the Exodusters, which essentially was a movement of black people to go out west. A lot of them sort of settled in Kansas. Papa Singleton was one of the big proponents for it. That's why Kansas is black population, I think by 1880 went from 10 to 15,000 people to around 60 to 70,000 people, and they're moving out. But white people, being white people, said that we know we tried to enslave you and we tried to trick you, but we don't want you to go and be successful. And they would have the Klan come after them. They'd have night raiders come and they'd attack black people and try to bring them back to the South. Black people even went out and they made their own black towns. Those black towns got super successful. And white people said, you can't be successful because we need to enslave you. And they would come and they would destroy those towns too. All of that's relevant to give a point of reference for the movie and a quick overview of Reconstruction, that the racist Johnson strangled and made a deal with people, so Reconstruction didn't work, hence America. Please go ahead.
No problem. Like no more about that.
Short enough? Was that succinct enough?
It was not a 900-page book, as correct, yes.
Okay.
But if you do want to know more about that, Haunted West is a great book to check out.
I was trying not to pitch the book, but I felt that if people didn't know Buck and the Preacher, they should know some Reconstruction stuff, and that's a short version of it. And
that's fair, because like since I had worked on / read Haunted West, I was much more familiar with this stuff. It's like, oh, of course, it's all this stuff, but you're right, that's not common knowledge. So
hence why I didn't cover this movie.
Fair enough. But actually, just to be fair to the movie, we start off with an opening crawl that tells us a very, very truncated version of this, and dedicates the picture to those unknown black folks who died during this time, which was a cool touch.
Question before you get started. Yep. Did that opening scroll make you think of Red Sun that also had to give you an opening scroll to explain history to people?
Yes. Already Red Sun was kind of in the back of my head when this goes on, and it just keeps happening after this. So yes, there's much left. Again, we're in this era of movies of like, hey, here's other stuff in Western history that you might be interested in. This
in my mind's eye. Before, each writer is sitting there thinking, fucking stupid Americans. I can't believe I have to type this up to explain this to you. That's what my mind's eye says. But please go ahead.
I think it's fair. In the late 1860s in the Kansas Territory, many freed slaves head out west in search of free land and a better life after promises made to them were broken. Former slave and Union Army Sergeant Buck became a self-employed wagon master to wagon trains of freed slaves heading west. Buck knows the region well, and he charges fair wages for the wagon trains employing him. However, not everyone in the region is friendly towards the westward traveling black settlers. A group of violent white men led by Deshay are hired by plantation owners in Louisiana to raid the black wagon trains and settlements to either scare them back to Louisiana or kill them. In order to achieve the same, the hired band of racists attack wagon trains and destroy the wagons, the supplies, and the food sources of the former slaves. They threaten the black settlers with harm, and they tell them to return to the southern states where they came from and work the plantations. Wagon Master Buck encourages the freed slaves to continue their trek westward and to not give up the dreams of settling in the West. Knowing this, the band of racists led by Deshay plan to capture and kill Buck by setting a trap at his home. However, silently warned by his wife, Buck escapes. And what's weird is like that very long summary is like 10 minutes of the film. Part of it because the opening crawl does a lot of literal exposition. Like, here's some historical stuff that you need for context to understand what's going on here. And also because it's just an efficient film, right? And I'm going to say this a lot, I think, through it, but like, it goes back to watchable. We've said this a lot, but in this case, it's I bring it up at the front because it is extremely well paced. It is not fast. You don't feel overwhelmed. It's not frenetic. It's a steady, very measured pace, but it's not. It slows down at the right points. And at this point, because it's all set up, is not the right point to slow down. So it just kind of quickly gets through everything it needs to do. Every scene, every moment, every line's doing something at this stage of the movie, which is just fantastic. It's like, okay, I didn't realize how far into the film I was. So I was like, I feel like a lot's happened. Let me pause. It's like, oh, it's only been 10 minutes. It was a wild to me how much had happened in that short space.
All right. This is more of a top of the charts question. How did you like seeing a film where you start with a black guy essentially, and then you have nothing but like black faces versus all the other westerns that we've seen that has minimized the number of black people in them to an absurd degree?
It was. I mean, I found it refreshing.
Was it shocking? I guess is a best way to put it.
No, I mean, it wasn't shocking. It was refreshing. I mean, partially because I knew going in this was a film that was who produced it and who directed it. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to be. I wasn't like, oh my god, there are black people. Like, of course it is, right? But and also given the brief bit I had at the beginning of history, it's like, okay, I know part of history we're in. I know already what's happening here. So of course there's going to be black people here because that's what this story's about, right? But it was refreshing. It was refreshing to see a lot of black people doing the kind of wagon train stuff that we've seen a lot of wagon trains throughout this run, and they're doing the exact same stuff. And it was really good to see them in that kind of role to be like, okay, yeah, they also filled these same spaces, and they had the same dreams and aspirations, and it was really cool to see that.
Yeah. And I remember the first time I saw it, how much I loved that, because the other one I could point a reference to during this run would be like Sergeant Rutledge specifically, because Sergeant Rutledge had a lot of black people, but they were all soldiers and they're primarily in the background. This is just people trying to live their lives, to give you like, we live in this time period. It's like, let us go settle and do our thing and leave us the fuck alone. And there's a different story there, narrative, even just visually shooting that and seeing them travel along in their train versus seeing like the soldiers riding their horses across the countryside.
Right. Like, this was a note for later, but it's relevant here. There is one white speaking part where they try to say non-racist things, right? Every other white speaking part is explicitly and intentionally racist. And yet I'm going to compare a lot to Django Unchained just because I think there's some overlap here. There's a very different vibe to it, right? Because in Django Unchained, it was, and we talked about this during our discussion on Patreon. It was so try hard. It was like, look, just try to shove it down people's throats in a performative way. Like, look at how bad these people are because they're just acting like villains. Whereas this one, it's like it's just inevitable, right? It's like these people, white characters are talking, and it's like it's not they're evil and cackling and trying how racist they are. It's more just like eventually going to say some racist shit. There it is, right?
Yeah.
And so it feels worse as a result because it's like you start to feel this black wagon train has nowhere else to go because everywhere they look, they're getting this shit in their face. But it's not evil; it's just there. I mean, it is evil, but like they're not self-aware evil.
It feels lived in, I think, is what.
There you go. That's a better way of putting it. That's a good way of putting it. Yes. It feels like it feels like it existed. It feels institutional too, right? It doesn't feel like I've chosen to be racist. It's no, everyone acts this way. It's horrible, but it is also what it is. So I mean, and again, this is like a small part at the beginning of the film. Like, yes, the raiders are coming in, and they're burning stuff, and they're doing explicitly evil acts. To the point where I absolutely did notice that Buck has legal papers, and the race is like, yeah, we don't care. Yeah, it's just like, oh no, white people in America are violating their own legal settlements for their own benefit. That never happens, right? It's like, okay, of course it's going to happen.
We could talk about like the 1,000 treaties that they made with indigenous people that they constantly went back on the second they needed to.
Yep, exactly. And so since I knew that much of history, I was like, of course it's inevitable. I could see why audiences at the time were like, that seems weird. I could see why maybe some people didn't know that. Be like, why would that happen? It's like, no, it's because that's what always happens. But even then, like in Django Unchained, each of the characters making those actions was because they just wanted to be that way. Here, it's these men were like, we have been hired by these people in Louisiana to bring these people back. We will do it by any means necessary. Yes, they're also assholes, and yes, they're also racists, but they have deluded themselves into thinking they're just doing a job.
There, I would push back on.
Deshay himself specifically seems to enjoy it, but the other characters they're not reluctant. No, but
I think one of them says also in the movie specifically, like, it's their way of life and they need that. So
right.
It goes back to the systemic institutionalization of racism that America was founded on.
Right. But again, like it's a different tone. Um, and to have all of this happening while you're still getting those huge vista shots of
Yeah.
the places they're shooting in. And one thing I did appreciate, but also noted, was when they shot the wagon train to see all those black faces, right?
Yeah.
Was really, really cool because it wasn't like, here's 15 people and then we're trying to shoot it in a way and make it like there's a whole bunch of them. It's like, no, they got dozens, maybe 100 people to act in this space. And it really helps to establish the scope and it really helps set the tone for the whole movie in a way that's really, really awesome.
The other thing to think, if we're thinking about it from a production standpoint, that also means all of those people got hired at least for a day or two. So they got paid to work and they get a credit for acting. And you talk about the landscapes and everything else. One of the things that we didn't mention is, remember, right, this film was shot in 3 different countries. I want to say it was shot in Mexico, Kenya, and the US.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
I think it's one of the only Western films shot in Kenya? Question mark.
Okay.
I don't have enough confidence to make that statement. So I'm like,
do you think
I know it was shot in Kenya, but I don't know if it's like the only one is where my question mark comes.
Oh, so, okay. All right.
Shot in Kenya. Maybe others were.
I'm curious, like, was part of the reason for shooting in Kenya was because it would be easier to get day actors, day players?
That I don't know. But I do know that, like, one of the places where all the green landscape was specifically shot there to represent, like, the freedom they got when they got to that spot. And the other places were shot to represent, like, the journey.
Interesting. Interesting. That's actually pretty cool.
This is me pulling random history from, like, the archives.
The other two I'm not as surprised by. Like, you know, a lot of Westerns were shot in some combination of US and Mexico. So those are less surprised me. But the Kenya one definitely is a surprise.
Or were you surprised that I don't think we shot in Monument Valley?
Well, no, because if we shot in Monument Valley, you have to get that shot of Monument Valley, and it wasn't in the film. So, ergo, could not have been shot in Monument Valley because there's only one shot you can have legally while you're filming there.
Okay. So when they come and I remember the exorcists try to get Buck to stay, but when Buck leaves, the fact that Deshay and his men come and they do all that ravaging, and then they try to act civilized, and so just tell us where Buck is
right.
An interesting dichotomy to watch, because in some senses, that's kind of how racism works. I think they can trick you if they're if they're vaguely polite.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But then you get to see the real undercurrent of who they are when he, like, executes the leader of their group when they say they don't know where Buck is. Like, bam, to show you really who they are. So those are good, realistic contrast.
Yeah, because how, I mean, racism, but also just how authoritarianism works, right, is a display of brutal power followed by the illusion of being reasonable, with the idea of, if you don't equally act reasonable, then what happens next is on the fault of the victim, not the fault of the oppressor. So it's a common manipulation / self-delusion tactic.
Yes.
And of course, there's no possible modern parallels to that today.
None at all. None at all. I did love the fact that you get Ruby Dee, and she's calm and cool the whole time. She gets to signal to him, and they know something's up. And we get an action scene. Like, within the first 10, 15 minutes of the movie, we have a non-horse riding action scene, which lots of riding horses in this movie. Just
there's a lot of riding horses in the movie.
We didn't get a lot of it before. I made a comment about it for the Valley of Gwangi that there's horse riding. This says horse riding.
Right. But because it's funny, we've had a weird run of Westerns a bit here where there's not been a ton of action. So, like, we're actually coming back to action a little bit. There's some in Red Sun, but it's also a bit different. So I've noticed that there are reductively 2 very loose schools of how guns work in Westerns, right? Which is, I think you mentioned before, like the rifles trump pistols school, which means that pistols, you just fire them constantly and nothing really happens. And then there's the every shot is deadly school, where I fire once and someone falls over. And this seems to be falling into the latter category. And I think that lethality helps to establish the stakes of the movie.
100%. It's not like Django, where I have like my Gatling gun and I like gun down a whole bunch of people and 2 or 3 of them still run away. It's like, what?
Right. No, there should be bloody salsa on the streets, right? No, it's just but again, another note I have for later, but it's worth talking here. We're also, because we're coming back out of the spaghetti westerns, where violence is used as a emphasis for the plot. We're back into much more traditional American Western style, where blood is very minimal. So you just get the kind of classic puff of smoke, you hear a bang, someone grabs their stomach and falls over, right? So there is an interesting balance there of like each shot means something, which goes back to the efficient pacing of the movie. Like every gunshot leads to something in the plot happening, more or less.
Mostly, I would agree.
Right.
Because the thing is, I agree, like the lethality, if someone's hit, they're dead. But we also have times when they don't hit, specifically. Like sometimes it hits the rock, sometimes it hits like the barn door above him, or literally Sidney Poitier diving out of the way behind a haystack. So there's lethality there, but there's a mix of pulp at the same time.
Yes, I agree with that. But even then, like, because the people die so quickly, you understand that he can't just stand there and dodge, right? His dodges are extremely active. That's why I'm saying, like, each shot moves the plot along because it's steadily getting him away from his house.
Yeah. Okay.
Each dodge and move is getting further away from his wife. But to your point, yes, like there's a smidge of pulp there, and it does get a bit more relevant a bit later in the film. But so it's kind of weird thing of like, it's not gory, it's not violent, but violence is a necessary undercurrent of the film. So it's an interesting balance this movie is walking. The movie cannot work without violence, but it does not luxuriate in violence the same way that the spaghetti westerns did.
So I think also part of it is that the spaghetti westerns have that like style of like, we're going to shoot and like there's blood everywhere else. This has the undercurrent of violence constantly throughout the film anytime you are with the black wagon train, because they're under constant pressure to keep moving. They're under constant assault from all sides. They don't have supplies. They have minimal weapons, and they have night raiders constantly attacking them at almost any point in time. So the violence is much like the black experience in society. It's implied constantly around you, and you're always under pressure.
Oh, no, I can totally see that. Especially considering most of the actually violent things happening, particularly at this part of the movie, are to things like your home, where your supplies are, things that you consider to be safe are destroyed. So you're right, that is violence that are removed. So that's an interesting point, actually. That just makes a ton of sense.
And so part of me wonders is if the reason Poitier takes over is because the other director couldn't bring that to it because they didn't see it, because it wasn't their lived experience, which goes back to a lived experience. Telling stories of your own people to some extent have a different power and resonance with them, which is why I think Django Unchained, spoiler, is a great movie. It is over the top, but it is definitely told by a white guy.
Right. Another, I won't say balancing act, because I don't think it actually quite works here, is you take all of that drama and violent undercurrents and tension, and you contrast it with the bounciest mouth harp music I think I've ever heard in my life. So it's like you have, Buck's trying to escape with his life, and just saw the wagon train burn. You hear boing, 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 and it's just like, what is going on? And it goes through the whole movie.
So, black people created country music, right?
I did know that, yes.
Yeah. So I just want to put it out in the air and just record it so everyone knows.
Sure, yeah, no. They invented rock and roll too.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to remember the talk because there was a specific talk about the soundtrack that I don't remember. So, but it was a choice I think Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte made. And they like talk to musicians to have them do that, and I love it. I do. Yeah. I just do. That's it.
I mean, like I'm like, so I take my notes as I watch the movie, right? So like a lot of times I'll put notes here and then I'll have thoughts later, and I just don't bother to correct them because I like to know where my head's at the moment. And so certainly at this point in the movie, I was just like, what is happening with this music? It did grow on me, right, over the course of the movie, and it was just like it somehow weirdly fits. It just, and like at first I was like, but it's so dissonant. Like you have these dramatic moments in this bouncy music, but I started to realize that's kind of also sort of the point. You know, particularly when the preacher gets involved. We're not quite there yet. When the preacher gets involved, his energy clicks much better with the music. Yeah. Whereas Buck is very kind of, Sidney Poitier is like very serious and dramatic, and then you have this kind of lively music. But also it's 10 minutes of the movie, right? As the movie goes on, you start to realize that all of these characters have life and vitality. It's just we're not quite seeing it yet at this very start.
So I guess I'll make one point here, but I won't go into great detail about it. Part of the thing is during enslavement and just in general, a lot of Black joy comes from music, the community, religion, and also during music and religion, they were able to exchange secret messages between each other that enslavers couldn't catch on to.
Right.
So part of me is curious if part of the music is also inspired by that. But that's a larger discussion that I'm not going to have right now.
I can totally see that. Anything else before we move on?
Eddie, he crawled through the fence and then dived behind a haystack. Like literally, there were no stunt people. That was Sidney Poitier. Yeah, dive with their haystack.
Did it?
I think at his age, I couldn't dive behind a haystack without breaking something. That's it. That's my whole thing.
I can't walk across the street without breaking something. What are you talking about? Chased by the Deshay racists, Buck and his tired horse arrive at a river where he chances across Reverend Willis Oakes Rutherford, a shady individual masquerading as a preacher, and forces the preacher to switch horses with him. Buck meets up with another group of freed slaves who decide to start a wagon train to Colorado. Meanwhile, the preacher heads to the nearest town where he bumps into Deshay's gang. Recognizing Buck's horse, the gang interrogates the preacher about Buck's whereabouts. Deshay promises a $500 reward to the preacher if he finds Buck and captures or kills him. Deshay also instructs the preacher to convince all the black settlers to turn back east towards the southern plantations and abandon their westward trek. The preacher agrees with Deshay and leaves town. So, the first meeting between Buck and the preacher, amazing. Harry Belafonte is butt-ass naked. And the argument about his drawers, almost for a while, his line about can I get in the drawers or are you gonna steal them too was almost my intro line for a while.
Oh god, that is hilarious. And if I remember right, he actually blackened his teeth to do the role too, because Harry Belafonte was a beautiful man. And he's like, I need to bring my beauty down to play the role, to get in character.
Right. Like, I had to look up. I was like, okay, statistically speaking, I know Harry Belafonte is the other lead in this film. This is the preacher. Ergo, this must be Harry Belafonte. But I had to double check because I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Because he is in that role.
And funnily enough, if I remember right, also I'm putting a lot of caveats, so fuck caveats. Harry Belafonte was more of an actor who became a singer versus I think as people know him now, like a singer that did a little acting. Right. Because big spoiler, we're going to cover his noir film relatively soon. I haven't told you when yet, but it's coming up.
Nice.
It's like the Edge of Tomorrow or something like that.
I always thought he was a singer who decided to move into acting.
No, like the story that I saw in an interview with someone saying that he didn't think that he could sing, but he did like singing for a role, and they were like, "You're a great singer," and that's how it sort of happened.
Okay.
If my internet media is wrong, it's wrong, but that's the story I'm putting out right now.
Sure, why not? I love it. Either way, he could do both very well.
So you were saying butt ass naked.
Butt ass naked. I mean, I don't want to dwell on that, but it was certainly that was the most shocking part of the film to this point, right? Like, oh, much black. Okay, that's cool. Harry Belafonte's butt ass naked. I was not expecting to see that today, but here we are.
Well, all right, we're gonna dwell on that for a minute now. Up to this point, have you seen any other leads in a Western film, male leads in a Western film, be butt ass naked?
Technically, yes, but I don't know if El Topo counts.
Yeah, he did get naked in El Topo, didn't he?
Yep.
Sort of.
And his son was naked.
Yeah, but the son wasn't a lead. I specifically said lead, so we didn't have to talk about
the
Alejandro's weirdness of having
central to the whole movie, even though he's played by a different actor later on who was not naked. But yes.
Just saying.
Yes. But El Topo aside, no. And that was the first point where I realized there's a bit of blaxploitation energy in this movie too, right?
Yeah. I think there's smidges. People have said there's a lot. I think smidges.
Right, but this first encounter certainly feels like that. It's one of the smidges, right?
Yeah, hands down.
And so it led to how the conversation starts, kind of in a, oh, let's compare and contrast two different acting styles of black actors, right? But the whole scene spirals in amazing different directions, and the film actually sits here for a minute and talks about it because, like, Buck is in the wrong.
Yes.
He's stealing another man's horse. He's desperate, but he is stealing another man's horse.
He offered to buy it.
He did.
And he leaves him a horse. So
right.
I think theft, maybe I like Buck a lot. So maybe I'm saying theft is not the right. He exchanged horses with him.
Certainly Buck tries to cram the situation into his moral code, right? But the preacher correctly points out, that is my horse. I do not want you to take it. You're taking it anyway. And then Buck does tell him to get naked again. So he won't chase after him.
But you're right. He did steal his horse. And I loved like the negotiation between the two of them. Because you have like the preacher coming out of the water. And you've got Buck there by his horse staring at him. And he's trying to rationally explain to him that, like, I'll pay you $20 for your horse. And have the preacher banter back, I'm not a horse trader.
Right.
So all of that's there.
Right. And I like it because, unlike Red Son, where the roles between the two leads were very well established and they slowly grow and change to see the other viewpoints, here we have those roles are briefly swapped at the very beginning, right? The preacher is arguing for this is what is right from his perspective, from his very specific perspective, right? This is my horse. I would like to keep it. And Buck is trying to convince someone else to do something that he needs to get done. So, like, briefly, very briefly, Buck is the opportunist and the preacher is the person arguing for legality. This does not stand very long, but it's an interesting way to start them off on the opposite foot that they're normally going to be presented and then bring them back to their respective roles almost immediately after the scene.
Yeah. And if I was going to give them stats, for instance, you would say that Buck has a very high, like, shotgun skill. Preacher has a very high talkie skill, which you get even in this scene where Buck can't convince him of anything, like, hands down. But later on, we're going to see the preacher is convincing people of shit left and right.
Right, exactly. So they're both using the skills they're bad at when they first meet each other. Moving away from that scene because it's a great scene. It's great to linger here. I try, and I swear to God this is true, I do try when I watch these films not to constantly think about Haunted West because I know a lot of these films were inspirational to you when you made Haunted West. So I try not to think of it and go, oh, that's Haunted West shit. But an old man throwing bones on the ground and making predictions is some Haunted West shit.
What are you talking about, Eddie?
He does it twice. Twice in the movie.
Yeah, he does, doesn't it?
I was just like, it's wonderful, but I was just like, huh, this is the most explicitly Haunted West thing I can point to and go, yep, right there.
Who knows where ideas come from, my friend?
Right. More relevant to our run, though, I was glad to see that the Kid for the Side Hustle train is continuing. This is like the fourth movie now. We've had a Kid with the Side Hustle in it.
All right, but this kid, unlike the one from the Valley of Gwangi, is plot relevant.
Yes, he is.
No offense to Loopy, I think was the name of the kid from the Valley of Gwangi, who was just there to, I don't know, be the best part of that whole movie.
Really? Well, yes, but he also did get kidnapped by the dinosaur briefly. So,
so I still have so many problems with that. Fucking like pterodactyl thing comes, picks up a cow, and flies off into the distance. I can't pick up like a 40 kid.
With the kid, yeah, he's too heavy. Yeah, it's all the money in his pockets, Chris.
Could be like not here to renegotiate that, but this kid is plot relevant, but doesn't get as much screen time as the other one did.
I know, yes. But I mean, he did charge 40 cents for a bottle of whiskey, so I mean, you know, he's got some entrepreneurial spirit.
The encounter with the Shay.
Yeah.
In Preacher. Like that's
yeah, it's great because you can see in Belafonte's performance that he's terrified. Like, any moment I'm gonna die. Right? But it doesn't he doesn't. It's weird because like the Preacher is overacting. The Preacher is over accentuating his words. He's trying to desperately seem like a nice guy, not worth killing. But Belafonte is underplaying the character's fear. So it's a really good balance. You can see that it's not Belafonte overacting, it's Belafonte underacting, but the Preacher is overacting, which is a very, very hard nuance. But it is.
Yes.
I can't. I try to go. Am I overthinking this? But no, it genuinely is there on the screen, right? The Preacher is desperately trying to hide it, but you don't see it in his performance. You see it in his body language more than anything else.
I was going to mention it later, but I'll mention it here. Is that a lot of the overacting and stuff that you see is him putting on what he knows they expect from a black person to do from their racist perspectives. And that is sort of his shield of protection to try to save himself in the situation. Mm-hmm. So you get that on full display, and it is fascinating to watch him pull that off.
Yes, and I think it helps because in short succession, we see him act in 3 different ways. He acts differently with Buck than he does with the kid than he does with Deshay. Even though there's a continuity, it all feels like the same character. It doesn't feel like he's all over the place. But with Buck, he is earnest and frustrated. With the kid, he is genuinely joyful. And then with Deshay, his happiness is very much masking anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this weird revelation at this point in the scene that he was less scared of a man pointing a gun at him when he was butt naked than he is surrounded by white people when he has no immediate need to think that he's in danger, except for the fact that he's surrounded by white people.
And that goes back to the lived-in threat that all black people have to live with.
Yeah. And I really saw that in the screen in a way that I've only seen a couple of the movies we talked about, but I definitely saw that in that moment. And again, it was very underplayed. If I hadn't been walking through these movies with you, I may not have noticed it if I was watching this movie on my own. But now that we've had these conversations, I saw it there on the screen, and it was very much, like you said, that lived experience.
And so you have Deshay offering him $100, but you'll notice Preacher never says yes or accepts the offer. He just sort of repeats it, but then goes out of his way to find out where they're going to be. Mm-hmm. So it's showing you like a level of thinking that is 4 or 5 steps ahead of where these guys are already, even while he's under all this pressure and just trying to live and get by.
Right. And again, I think the conversation with the kid really helps that, because we see that he cares about his community. He genuinely, that's why I pulled the line I did, because it's like he wants to be with his community. And so, but knowing he is, like I said, a talker, he's a fast talker, I did immediately clock that he's not actually answering it, but because the racists have pigeonholed him to a certain role, they've just assumed he's accepted.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this movie is this is half an hour. This movie is so efficient at how it gets its stuff done. Is there anything else about this chunk?
No, that's good.
Okay. Outside town, the preacher meets the wagon train formed of freed slaves and led by Buck. After an angry exchange, the preacher notices that all the money of the wagon train is kept in a money belt one of the women carries around her waist, and he decides to ride along with them. A distrustful Buck orders the preacher to leave the wagon train. Later, Buck rides away to scout the area and to pay in cash a rite of passage to the local native tribe on behalf of the trespassing wagon train. The preacher follows Buck, and he witnesses the payment made by Buck to the tribe's chief for safe passage of the settlers. In return, the tribe allowed settlers to move across native territory unhindered and to hunt a few buffalo needed to feed the wagon train settlers. And I'll be honest, I was actually surprised by where this movie started going after this point in time, because it's like, okay, it's Buck and the Preacher. It's in the title. So they briefly separate. They come back together. He sees Buck and wagon train, and Buck and Preacher goes, I'm going to follow along the wagon train. I figure, and now they're going to hang out together. And then Buck's like, no, get out. I was like, wait, what? What is happening now? That's not how this is supposed to go.
Of course it is. So what I love the fact that when he comes back, though, he punches Buck. And Buck doesn't fight. He's like, you know what? You're right. You have every right to punch me in the face. You get one. Yeah.
Right.
Which goes back to Buck's own moral compass and code.
Right. Also, in the scene, I forgot. I said before, there's one character who doesn't say racist thing. I forgot. There's another white character. Because there's a very brief scene between a white farmer and the wagon train, which I really love, because it was like, hey, you worked for this time. Here's the money I owe you. If you want to stay another season, I appreciate it. But if not, I totally understand. And then the leader of the wagon train is like, no, but it's the time for us to move on. And it's just like, it also shows like there's another side of this thing where outside of the rich people, the common folk didn't care a lot about this. There were, of course, obviously racist farmers and whatnot, but like there was a lot of them who also just were happy to just work with other people.
So yes and no. I love the fact that it shows that they're different perspectives. So one of the parts is that it's showing you the depth of white people at the same time as doing this. Like, for instance, we're going to spoiler, but the sheriff is like a complex character, the few bits that we get with the sheriff.
That was the one I was referencing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The big thing here is that for like the Southern strategy was their thing is they got a lot of poor farmers and everyone else to come fight for them to help defend their way of life, because they said that as long as there was someone essentially under you, you're better off. So that's a lot of the mentality that they use, which is why you had all those poor white farmers come up to go and fight people, because they could consider black people to be lesser than they were.
Okay, fair.
So there's a whole bunch of other things going there too, which it's a longer discussion. I'm truncating it down. And if anyone listens and want to have a conversation with me, I'm happy to have it. But
sure, but that's fair. So, but I mean, I think it's at least fair to say, like you said earlier, like it was cool to see different perspectives, right? That the fact that not every interaction had to be laced with potential violence, which is a good counterpoint to the rest of the film where a lot of that starts to happen. So it's good to have a moment here. And also it ties to, again, I also noted it because then there's a later scene where Buck then takes that money to the native tribe and makes a very similar deal. It's like, we'll pay you fair money for established thing that the movie implies there's existing contracts. So it doesn't spend time reiterating the contract. It doesn't do as we have this agreement. They just, the agreement's just implied and we can deduce it from the dialogue in both cases. But it's we as black people want to give money to native people to have a similar arrangement, and they negotiate and come to a conclusion. So like seeing the capitalism happening outside of the group that is ostensibly the tool of capitalism was interesting, right?
Yeah.
It's to pull stereotype terms. It's very much kind of like a street economy, right? It's we'll use this money to get done, and it's also relevant because you then understand why the wagon train has money, and why that money is a concern, and why that money also is a limited resource, even though it sounds like a lot. So again, very efficient, doing a lot of things simultaneously, but it's a very efficient way of saying the wagon train functionally is not that much different from a shipment of like a financial shipment, right? Like, this is like a bank train. They have a lot of cash on them, and so people might want to rob them,
Yeah,
including potentially the preacher.
definitely
And
the preacher.
right, and so there's a lot of, okay, this wagon train also has money associated with it, but it's done in such a way that the money is not taking the story away from the settlers, because a different structure of this could have been very much, and they're loaded, and that becomes the whole plot thread. It's like they're rich and we have to protect the money and blah blah blah. It's like, no, they're not rich. The movie makes it very clear they're not rich. They need that money to get the life that they want, and they need that money not just to establish themselves in a new place, but also to get there, because they have to trade with people and they have to use money to trade to get people to get to where they need to go. So it is a resource. But other people outside of the wagon train do not see it as a resource. They see it as something to covet. And so we get to an interesting, another moral complex point of the film.
And I loved watching the negotiation between Buck and like the chief to go back and forth. And it was the intermediary going with him and the chief listening. And you know that the chief probably understands what he's saying.
Right.
Which goes back to like the Red Sun beat too. But here we have Buck is being respectful of all of them. It even warns Preacher that if you want to live, you got to be respectful to these people. Which
right.
goes back to his time with the Union Army.
And yeah, so that's the chief's wife. The translator's Sensi. And I noted her name down because I fucking love Sensi. She's
so I read that she was Harry Belafonte's first wife.
Oh,
and a white Jewish woman.
I don't like her as much as I used to.
And the thing I read is that she went to like the museums and everything else to learn the language so that she could speak it properly. So I'm torn on that because it shows the fact that there's a respect for the language of trying to get it right, but at the same time, for a movie that's doing like all this great work, Mike and cast an indigenous person. So
yeah, that's a very Chakotay and Star Trek Voyager kind of situation, you know.
But at the same time, it's done a phenomenal amount of work and it's giving respect, but it's and then I think maybe it's because Belafonte's wife, they wanted to give her a role, but because even Ruby Dee's role is very small in the film.
Right. And like, again, with realizing how many of the actors were actually native, there were a lot there. Again, like another big sweeping shot showing how many people were in this tribe, or at least this forward arm of the tribe. Was very, very cool. I will say, bit of a ding. I don't know when the subtitles for this movie were written, but they were full of. I apologize for this, but they're full of Indian language subtitle things, and it's just like, one, name the tribe, but two, really the I word at this day and age? It's like not even like a new thing. It's like 30, 40 years we've used Native American. This is not a new creation. It's just like,
yeah, that's part of it. So I got a lot of love for it, but I will also point out things that bothers me, and that is one of the biggest things.
Aside from that, I've been seeing a continuing trend of presenting natives as more authentically than just, the big feathery turbans with tomahawks. No, they have guns. They wear modern clothing for the time periods. They have modern arrangements with people. There's a scene later that digs into this much more. I'll save a lot of that for there, but it was just a nice moment of like, there are a lot of characters on the screen doing interesting and nuanced social dynamics that do not involve any white people, and that is really fun to see sometimes.
Yes, far ahead, I think, of almost any other Western up to this point.
Yeah. I think this is the first time we've had this many non-white people involved in a scene of this nuance so far. Unless you count the fact that probably a lot of people in El Topo are Mexican. But anyway, anything else about this chunk?
No, it's funny how El Topo keeps coming back. I wonder if that's going to be like our new Doctor Who. Doctor Who is our touchstone for a while. Now is El Topo going to be our touchstone?
Right. Yeah. El Topo is going to take over this podcast. Okay.
Eddie, we could go back and do one for every 1 minute of El Topo. We do an entire episode. Come on.
No. Dear God, no.
All right.
When Buck and the Preacher return to the wagon train, a gruesome scene awaits. Deshae's gang attacked the wagon train, stole the settlers' money, destroyed their food and supplies, and even killed several settlers, including the boy that the Preacher had bonded with. Heartbroken, the surviving settlers want to continue, and Buck waves his fee to help them. Angry at the devastation, Buck and the Preacher decide to exact revenge on Deshae's gang and also try to retrieve money Deshae stole from black settlers. And again, this is a movie where, because it's so efficient, it's noteworthy when it takes time to linger on a moment. And so I just really love the really kind of small 10-second vignettes of just the people trying to sleep. And like, two people like making out, one guy trying to get with his wife, but then the kid cries and she pushes him away, the boy getting up to take a pee. And it really helps to establish that community, because you have to really care about this community one last moment before what happens. But it's so well done. And there's very few, I don't think there's any speaking parts during all that. It's just like ambient noise and crying and muttering and whatnot. But it does such a good job of making you care about these people before this horrible thing happens. So it's really, really well done.
And there's also an implied sexual assault too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which
it's not all happiness, but it is a community.
Well, I mean, from the racist, there's an implied sexual assault, because when he rides back with the woman, she looks like something had occurred to her. So it's implied it's not stated and it's not necessarily there. But if you know anything about history, you know that that's what happened a lot.
Right. I thought you were talking about the fact that there was a man and a woman arguing at one point in time in that scene. And
no.
Okay.
That's just couples being couples.
Right. Fair. But yeah, and so like, they've stolen the money, which was the big thing. And so we get this interesting moment because Preacher comes along with Buck, and like there are lines, right? But we as the audience are not 100% sure what Preacher's motivations are, right? We've seen him genuinely care about his community, specifically about the child that upsold him a bottle of booze. He cares about that boy, and he has a very strong reaction to that boy's death. But also the fact that the money was stolen seems to be the point that he's stuck on during that conversation.
Yeah, because the only reason that Preacher is back with Buck and he had the encounter with the indigenous people is because he was spying on Buck, and he came to warn him about the indigenous people, showing that like he cares about Buck enough to like try to help him out. But does he care about him because he wants the money? Right. He keeps coming back to the money is why he's helping. So that altruism is suspect.
Right. But the fact that there's this nuance here, right, means that when Buck and the Preacher are finally actually working together at the halfway point of the film, it does feel earned, even though it's been 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So again, like, it's because all of the scenes with Buck and the Preacher have been very tactical and fairly well crafted and extremely well acted. This doesn't feel like finally they're together. It just feels like, thank God, thank God they're on the same page for once, because you want these two men to work together because you can see the flaws, but the goodness in both of them. It's like, you do want them to hang out and be buddies. It's like, yes, please be friends. And the movie just keeps like going, no, they can't be friends. And so finally get to this point. It's really well earned.
Excellent.
Anything else before we move on to the revenge?
No. That's good.
As the revenge starts. The gang resides in the town of Copper Springs, where the sheriff, an honest man, doesn't agree with the gang's ruthless tactics against wagon trains of freed slaves, but Deshay claims they're legally contracted by a quote-unquote labor organization. The sheriff doesn't buy it and warns Deshay to stay within the law. Buck and the preacher arrive in Copper Springs and set out to ambush 5 of the racists in the brothel. The preacher distracts the racists by preaching against fornication and asking for the money promised to him to find Buck. Then Buck barges in and shoots them all down while the preacher shoots the ones still upstairs, and Buck catches one outside. They search the racists, but soon they don't have even a tenth of the stolen money. While interrogating the brothel owner, Esther, about the rest of the money, she screams and attracts the attention of the rest of the racists in town. So, the preacher walking into the brothel. Sounds like a startup of a joke. Is simultaneously both hilarious and tense the whole time.
Yes.
Right? Like the preacher blessing a brothel is just straight up fucking funny. And going on about fornication. But then while all this is happening, Esther just continually being racist to him constantly throughout that continues to underscore how much danger the preacher is in while he's being this funny.
It's incredible. Like,
yeah.
And he's living up and he's leaning into their expectations of what they think he is more over the top. And he lets Buck know that he'll be the distraction that he needs to get it done.
Right. And like we said before, like we saw that scene of him sliding into that role of this is what a black man is perceived to be by white people. And so he's doing that again. And so we start to see that obviously he's not any kind of preacher, right? The preacher is a role that he's playing. And it's very clearly a role that he will bend and distort to his own needs. And so him leaning into the joke of I'm going to pretend to be an honest man in a brothel works really well because it helps the audience to understand this has always been a role for him. Like it's not him playing the preacher's the role, it's him playing the subservient black man that's the role.
And shotguns. I love the fact that Buck is using like shotguns. Like, so shotgun is his primary weapon, which in some aspects runs counter to what people would envision the protagonists of Westerns to use, because they primarily use pistols. Occasionally, the riflemen use a rifle, but pistols would be the go-to thing. So essentially, it is pistol, but it's a shotgun, which of itself is inverse.
Right, yeah, because these are sawed-off shotguns, right? Yeah. Because at one point in time, he has a full shotgun, but I think that was way back in the first scene between him and Preacher. But now we're at the sawed-off shotguns.
And you get Preacher with the pistols. So that's a nice contrast.
Right. It gives a nice visual contrast, but also it's the choice of weapon also, I think, kind of indicates their personality as well. Like Buck is a forceful man, right? He has a force for vengeance and a force for righteousness. And so he has the heavier, more impactful weapons, whereas the Preacher's a little more nimble, a little more flexible. And so he has pistols, give him a little more, a few more options. And I like that contrast.
Yeah. I don't think a shotgun even sawed off would fit in that book, though, like his Bible.
No. That's also, again, like he allows him to hide his weaponry, whereas Buck's like, I got guns, motherfucker. Here you go.
I loved it. Oh, the holy book.
And then something happens that I am shocked it took this long in our run to actually have happen, which is the well-worn trope of a cowboy jumps off of a roof onto his horse. We are 12 or 13 movies in. This is the first time I've seen it.
Is that really the first one?
I'm almost positive it is.
It is not the first one.
When's the first one?
You may not remember it, but I think the first one for this run was the Valley of Guanji.
Was there one in Valley of Guanji?
Because they were like on the little side of a cliff, and he jumps onto the horse from the side of the cliff.
Okay, but it was off of a roof.
Hey, you didn't.
But fair.
You did not qualify. You didn't equivocate that. You said jumped on a horse, and they Valley of Guanji.
Yeah, and the thing is, I suspect part of this is the reason why I think this is apparently a classic trope is because it happened all the time in Briscoe County Jr. So I kind of just assumed it happened all the time in Westerns.
You cannot make Briscoe County Jr. your baseline assumption for all Westerns. I love the show.
Disagree. I absolutely can, and I will. I think it also happened a fair lot in Lone Ranger, old Lone Ranger TV show.
Yeah.
Like the 50s TV show. So it's not just that, but it's funnier to say Briscoe County Jr.
It's not even really a gunfight. There's just killed.
No, it's just a massacre.
Which goes back to show the lethality of weapons and guns and why the element of surprise is important.
Right. And this does an interesting thing because this retroactively makes the scene where Buck's escaping his own house deadlier. Because if the movie is now playing with the rules, like if you get the drop on someone, you're probably going to win the fight.
Yeah.
Which I think we talked a little bit about High Noon. The High Noon gunfight was kind of that way too, right? It was not standing in the middle of the street drawing guns. It was I'm ducking and trying to get the first shot off because the first shot is usually the last shot. So yeah, it's very much in that vein. And so it's like, so Buck barely escaped with his life in a way that wasn't clear at the beginning of the movie, but now, okay, this is the rules we're playing with. So Buck's damn lucky to be alive, which goes back to your pulp assertion. Yeah. Buck is playing by pulp rules and everybody else isn't. Cheater.
Need any advantage you can get. Yeah, I think that's it. The jumping on the horses was pretty funny. And
it was.
Of course, what I love is that there's all this going on. The sheriff and his deputies are out eating, and the deputies look at the sheriff, and the sheriff actively eats slow until she screams. Yep. That's when he acts.
Right. Yeah. We see more about the sheriff later, but like you said before he's complicated, and I think that's a fair assessment because the movie's trying to assert like he's the only honest man in town, but like he still is going along with this stuff, even though he's constantly against it. So it's like he is still complicit.
Yes, he is, which is how racism works.
Right, exactly. Okay. Fleeing the town, Buck and the preacher are chased by the remaining racist into the morning. The preacher accidentally admits that he was offered money to deliver Buck, but he says he's no longer interested. The two men return to Buck's home, and Buck reunites with his wife, Ruth, who admits she's unharmed from a previous encounter. Buck tells Ruth they need new horses, and she has to come with him, although Ruth would prefer to flee to Canada. The racists arrive at Buck's house, but too late. Buck, Ruth, and the preacher have already fled. The preacher reveals he and his mother were sold to the traveling preacher, and after his mother was sold, the boy killed the traveling preacher and took his clothes or religious artifacts as his own. He then suggests robbing a mail shipment or a bank. As a side note, part of the reason why I stumbled there is because the nickname for Buckingham Palace here is Buckhouse, and so I kept trying to say Buckhouse instead of Buck's house. So that's why I kept stumbling there. But the confrontation, I kind of glossed over the confrontation about the money a little bit because I want to dig into it a little. I love how the preacher admits that he was going to sell Buck out because he's mad that they didn't even have the $500 they promised him. Right? He's outraged that the white man lied to him. Not even outraged. He's just like more reluctantly accepting this is what happened. And then Buck was like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah. I did kind of agree to sell you all.
But I love that he comes back. It's like, oh, I'm here, ain't I? To like end that conversation before.
And they're dead, ain't they? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which, to your earlier point, does not necessarily explicitly say he wouldn't do it again.
Yeah.
Right? So, again, like, to contrast with Red Sun, at this point in time in the movie, we're accepting that the trickster is more or less on board now. At this point, we're still not. We're more likely to believe the preacher is alone, but that completely removed all doubt.
Which is amazing. So, all right, the other thing is, if I had done this as my show, I would have quoted Ruth's speech about Canada because that is powerful. Like it is hands down, like moving to encapsulate their story in that one speech.
Honestly, the only reason why I didn't is because it's a really cool moment. It's a really cool beat. But I wanted to use a line specifically from either Buck or the preacher because of the title of the show. And the show the movie is ultimately about the two of them. But this scene is great because, again, we find out retroactively how complicated Buck's situation is because Buck could go, right? Buck is choosing to stay in these situations, choosing to help these wagon trains. And he says it's to get more money and to establish these, but we realize very quickly that's all excuses.
Yeah. And even their relationship, she's like, how she wants to have kids and everything else. And she said, you could help these people, but then we need to go. And it's constantly reinforced that America is poisoned land from inception, just about, since the Europeans invaded.
Right. And like, again, relevant to modern day, like, the fact that the fleeing the US to go to Canada thing is not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination, right?
Nope. That's what we all want to
do. So it's and because she's angry over the violence and betrayal of the United States specifically, right? Yeah. So it is a very powerful moment, and it's good that it's not in either Buck or the preacher's mouth, right? It allows her to say the quiet part out loud functionally in a way. But the separate thing is that because she literally had no speaking lines when we first saw her, it again allows us to very, very, very quickly get us to care about Ruth, because, spoiler alert, she's going to go along on these heists, which again, I was not expecting. I was like, okay, and they're going to leave her behind, and then she's going to leave the film. And like, nope, I'm coming along. It's like, what? I mean, awesome, but what?
And you also get Preacher reinforcing Ruth, saying you could leave and you don't leave, like right there, like switching to like join her side, that you have a chance to be free and live a life with this great woman, and you're fucking around here.
Right.
Doesn't understand, which goes back to his own trickster nature.
Right. But I actually quoted this because Buck's whole character gets summarized in one exchange where Ruth says, "Buck, honey, you're just one man." And Buck says, "But I gave my word." And at that point, the conversation stops, because everyone in that conversation realizes that's it. That's all. There's nothing more to say. And it tells you everything you need to know about Buck.
And that one line is also the epitome of what a Western hero is.
Yes. And that's one of the things that at this point in time, I was like, okay, this is a radical look at the Western as a concept. Completely agree with that. But Buck is an iconic Western hero, right? This is exactly what Western heroes should be. And Buck is exactly that.
Which is, funny enough, kind of how I live my life to some extent.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I said it. I made it about me, people. You're listening to my podcast. Well, all right, it's our podcast, but I made it about me again. So you should
do it more often.
To pull a line from Psych, suck it. Okay.
But then after that, the preacher kind of gives his backstory, and again, it's very poignant. But the one thing that struck me after hearing it was that we saw through their actions that both Buck and the preacher are willing to kill for righteous reasons. But now through their speech, they're confirming that they will still do that. Buck will do it because he gave his word. And these other people made him break his word, and he doesn't like that. And for the preacher is like, I will kill someone if they harm those that I care about.
Or if the money's right.
Right. Which, again, never completely off the table, even after that admission, which I love.
Yeah. And the other piece that I really love, though, is the fact that it specifically mentions that he and his mother were enslaved and sold, and then, like, she was sold again, goes into the history of how Black families were broken up by enslavers. Like, it's almost his story is quickly glossed over, but that is an integral piece of that experience.
That brings up a good point that I hadn't thought of consciously, or sorry, subconscious, is that, but aside from the scroll at the beginning, this movie does do a lot to explain the historical connotations of what's going on, but it's always done through character, right? Ruth's is probably the one that walks the closest to the line of, let me tell you a little bit about history of this time period, but it's all done through the concept of, I just want to go and have a good life, right? And to your point, like, this is Preacher, he's not saying, and this is how Black families are broken up. He's like, this is how my family was broken up. And everybody else hearing the conversation doesn't look shocked or awed. There's more like nodding of like, yes, of course, because we all know this happens. So that tells you everything you need to know about the context, but it's never info dumped. It's always done through character development, which is, again, fantastically efficient.
And I want people to stop and take a minute to think about that. Like, so for instance, there's enslavement, and say that like right when enslavement ends, one of the things is that people would put out ads in papers trying to find their family members that were stolen from them. So their families that were never reconnected, even though enslavement ended, like destroyed, decimated. And there were one of the, and like even a plot beat for Haunted West is like one of the plot hooks talks about your investigators are essentially work from one of the papers to go out and try to find these families members or other people. So that is a crucial part of history that happened, and families that were destroyed that never get discussed. Even here, it's not discussed. It's sort of highlighted briefly, and then we move on because the movie has to stay efficient, and it's a movie for people to see and watch and enjoy.
Right. And by pinning it to character arcs, to characters that we care about, even if we don't completely trust them, makes that history feel more real, right? Because it's not just a textbook telling you stuff happened. It's the, oh, this happened to characters I care about.
And it's hard not to like Preacher because he's super charismatic.
And he's very funny. Anything else before we get to more violence?
I think Ruth is the best horse rider amongst all three of them.
Sadly, I think you're right.
Because looking at the horse riding scenes, I was paying extra close attention, and Ruby D is like on that horse. She's like, yeah, motherfuckers, keep up.
She's a horse girl. You can tell she's a horse girl.
No, that's it. That was my whole big point. That Ruby D is awesome. Okay. You know.
The three return to Copper Springs, which is empty due to everyone else going out to look for them. Finding only one customer in the post office, Buck holds the postman at gunpoint and searches the mail for paper money. The postman reveals it's all been deposited at the bank. Suddenly, the sheriff and some of the racists return from their manhunt. Ruth blends into the group and sneaks guns to the two men before the three of them sneak into the bank. Holding the staff at gunpoint, they steal the latest deposits, including Esther's from last night's earnings, and lock everyone into the back office before trying to flee. However, the postman escapes screaming, "Hold up!" and Buck and the preacher shoot their way out without hurting anyone. The three flee, followed by the posse of racists. Ruth's horse stumbles, and she gets on Buck's horse as they flee to the place where they meet up with the Native American tribe. The tribe lets them pass, but stands firm against the posse. The sheriff stops his posse from shooting at the tribe. The chief says he won't fight the posse for him, and Buck only asks to buy supplies. The chief refuses to sell guns, but offers some food. Buck pushes, explaining the hardships of the wagon train. The chief explains the hardships of his own tribe. He needs the guns for their own fight. I'm going to, as much as I want to jump that scene, I do need to kind of scroll back to the heists, I should say. And like the post office scene is tense but weirdly funny. Particularly the preacher luring the one customer into the back is just genuinely hysterical.
So like, all right, for like Red Sun, the gold and stuff was super important too, but here literally we can't use gold because it weighs too much for horses. Yes. It's like reinforced. There's a box full of gold, and if they can take it, solve most of their problem.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny because like I had actually notes for a while about the box of gold, figuring it was going to come back in. No, it almost feels like it's one of the few times in the movie where it looks like they're actually trying to make a little bit of fun of Western tropes. Because like, here's a box of gold, not plot relevant, we're moving on, and that's it. And I was just like, but you're right, because any other Western movie, that would be like a big plot point or like the central MacGuffin of the film. And it's just like, yeah, that's too heavy, whatever. Paper money. Let's focus on paper money, you know, which is.
And I don't know if they're even making a joke or riffing on the fact that the gold standard for cash goes away eventually, but right now it's still in place. But that's historian me having a laugh. That's it.
Well, the other history bit that I thought was funny is like after all of the frustration at the post office about paper money, there's Elsie makes a passing line about like some of the notes she's in her Ohio bank notes, and are those still good, right? Which shows that even paper money is not actually all that solvent. because there's a lot of people using their own special notes at this point still.
Yeah, it's right after the war, of course, because the traitorous Southerners would have also had their own economy too. So it's harder story.
Right. But again, like it was a nice little kind of beat of there was a line that we didn't cover where I think it was Buck. No, it was the preacher who makes the comments of, I bet most of the money that they stole probably got spent at the whorehouse or at the brothel. And then Elsie comes in to deposit her money. So the movie doesn't say it, but you very much get the implication that they probably ended up stealing back a bunch of money that was stolen from them.
But it doesn't need to say it. That's the
right. Oh. I love the fact the movie doesn't bother to spell that out, because it's like, if you pay attention to the movie, it's pretty clear what happens, but the movie doesn't say, oh, look, we got our money back. No one has to do that. And I actually really like that, because frankly, there's not enough time to have that conversation, because they pretty much immediately get into a shooting match.
Yes, but they made her a large enough character that even her popping up in the scene again, you remember who she is. So it's like little touches like that. But you're right. They shoot their way out of town, but they don't kill anyone. Like I said, they shoot at like the top of something, and the sheriff dives out of the way, and all this other stuff. Minimizing a body count on their half right now.
Right.
On their part.
Which is fascinating, because this is right after the scene where they said they were happy to murder people if they felt it was necessary, which proves that they know, like a lot of these people, some of them are genuinely people coming after them, but also a lot of them are just people in the town who think they're defending themselves. So it's like, we're not going to, they're just the people who happen to have the money, so they're not worth killing. So we're going to intentionally shoot our way out in a way that doesn't hurt them, which also reinforces their skill with the weapons, especially with sawed-off shotguns.
All right, and we get a big riding scene. Even every time Ruby Dee's horse stumble, I just sort of roll my eyes and go, of course, they had her horse stumble.
Right.
That's it. I'll let it go.
Right. Yeah. It's just like, but I mean, it bleeds into the next chunk, but there's a bit of like, 3 horses gone to 2, and then 2 horses gone to 1, and it's a way to visibly show that they're losing resources in their attempt to flee. So it's like, I see what they're doing there. But also, you're right. That was one of the few points where it's like, no, she's clearly the better horse person in all of these. It should be the preacher's horse that stumbled, and then he gets on the back of Buck's horse. That would be funny, right? But I get it.
All right, that's it. That's minor quibble. I'll let it
go. So the scene with the natives, they ride past the line of natives, and then they close ranks so that the posse can't go any further. And again, we have the sheriff who's conflicted. It's like, oh, we can't shoot them, blah, blah, he's saying all the right things. But again, he was at the head of a posse of racists. So still complicit,
So this is where it gets more gray and murky, though. Like, they are racist. He himself, we don't know. He cares about the law. We'll assume he is like the law man. Right. And so he's trying to minimize conflict in his own town. The thing is, they just robbed a bank in his town. So therefore,
fair.
He doesn't know that the racist people working for Louisiana folks stole all their money and everything else. He doesn't have that knowledge.
True. That's a good point.
So I'm not equivocate. I'm not going to vouch for him, but I'm saying that, like, from a lawman's perspective, he's doing what he's supposed to do, which is why I said he adds more nuance to the people. Like, and he has them not shoot at indigenous nations people, because he mentions like another group of people that did that didn't come back. So it's maybe we don't get killed out here by these people that vastly outnumber us.
Right. And also all have guns as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have the scene with the chief. And it's, again, just gut-punching powerful, because like the chief talks about, here's what the armies did to us. And then they point at Buck at one point, and he's like, I ain't in the army no more. Right. Which, again, that one line tells you a lot about how disillusioned Buck has become. But the chief has let him off the hook. Right. It's like, my people need the guns to survive. I can't give them to you. You suffered. We've suffered. I'm giving you food. I'm giving you supplies. That's more than I need to. Is basically how the conversation goes. And Buck ultimately, he's desperate and they need these things, but also he does come around to like, you know what, it's fair. I appreciate whatever you're giving me.
Because he also points out that like Buck wore that uniform and fought against him. So the fact they have this relationship in of itself is amazing. And so, and more historically accurate, but there's, because after the Civil War, essentially, they brought in more black soldiers to have them go and fight indigenous peoples. It's what white or people generally in power do. They create rifts between marginalized groups, so they fight amongst themselves. Is how they maintain their power.
Mm-hmm. Right,
and that's more and more like the Buffalo Soldiers. Essentially, one of the ways that the Buffalo Soldiers got their name is that they were named by the indigenous people for like how brave they fought and everything else. It reminded them of the buffalo. It's like one interpretation of it, depending on how you want to go.
Okay, I had always thought it was because they massacred buffaloes to try to starve out native tribes, but
depends on which one you're going with. One of the ones I really don't like is they were saying that their hair was curly and like, that's super racist.
I don't like that one
by white people. So no, it's like that,
right? But like again, we've only had 2 scenes, and to be blunt, one of the characters involved is not speaking English, and to your point, officially doesn't understand English, but we kind of get the impression that he probably does, right? But even then, like the actor is such a powerful performance, right? You really feel for where the chief's coming from, and it's not. His wife has to translate, but it's not filtered through her. When she's translating, she's bringing her own spin and cadence to the words, and we realize that they're similar but not identical. She's a little more resigned, annoyed, frustrated, whereas the chief is very passionate. He very fervently believes it protects people, and she seems a bit more like, let's get down to business about it all. Never in a way that makes you feel like she's undercutting him, but certainly she is also a character in this scene. She's not just translating his words. So, which again, very strong tightrope to walk. Okay, ready to wrap this up?
Yeah.
Okay. After camping in the tribe's lands, a scout finds the posse are going after the wagon train, not Buck. The chief offers some men to help him guide the 3 of the wagon train, but reiterates the natives won't fight for them. The preacher tries to talk Buck out of going after them, but after nearly getting shot, the preacher decides to go with Buck and Ruth. The sheriff reminds Marcus, one of the racists, that the wagon train hasn't broken any laws and gets stabbed for his trouble. Marcus takes control of the posse and they attack the wagon train. Buck and the preacher lure the posse away from the wagon train and into a canyon, losing another horse in the process as the natives watch. The 2 men get into a shootout with the posse, using the environment to pick them off one at a time. But eventually the preacher gets shot, first in his arms and then in the leg. Buck goes to help and gets shot himself. Marcus tries to take advantage and gets shot by Buck in the face. The other racists try to shoot the preacher, and the natives intercede, chasing off the posse. The wagon train arrives to rescue Buck and the preacher. The wagon trains eventually make it to their lands, while the 3 heroes ride off into the credits.
Hard cut.
Now,
shitty.
We should start at the top, but I do want to briefly say I did appreciate. I feel like it had to have been intentional, subverting the trope of the cavalry, because it's such an iconic thing of the cavalry arrives, but it's the natives arriving that is acting as a quote-unquote cavalry here, which is amazing.
Every part of it's awesome.
Right. But yeah, so the conversation about going after the wagon train versus like Buck and the preacher could have escaped. But like, nope, they're going to go after and murder the wagon train again. And we've seen twice now what they will do when they get there. And so Buck's like, I got to go. And preacher arguing with him is fascinating.
You mean like he's trying to figure out if he could escape through them, and then preacher just decides to leave? He pulls you know what? Han Solo pulled a preacher in Star Wars.
Right. Because yeah, it's basically Buck's like, you can go, but here are the two bad options you have. And then Preacher, again, surprisingly, genuinely tries to leave, nearly gets murdered, and says, you know, it's like I thought maybe I will go on that suicide quest. That seems fine, right? The Preacher never really becomes a redemptive character. I mean, the very, 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 very end after he gets shot, maybe. But, like, he's always got that self-interest throughout the entire film.
Yeah, he was going to leave with his money and have a good life. He tells Buck to do the same, like go to Canada.
Yeah. So he got like what? He got like $1,500. That was his share of the money, right?
Like 1,800, I think. That's just me. I haven't watched the movie a couple times, so yeah.
Right, but yeah, it was a lot more than the 500 years which he promised, right? So he made out. He could have walked away, doing much better than he ever thought he ever could at this whole scenario, and he either gets shot. But again, like, it's telling that he comes back to Buck and thinks he has more safety there, which is interesting, right? That's why I thought it's interesting, because it's like, it's not I like Red Son. I really enjoyed Red Son, but it was also very much the last third of the film, you kind of saw where the whole movie was going, and it more or less goes there, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this movie, it's like, I kept thinking, just the point where Buck, or the Preacher, just goes along with everything, and he never really does. And I like that. And at the point where it's like, Buck's finally gonna get his head out of his ass and do no. Okay, he's honor bound. I gave my word, so I'm going to throw everything away and go after the wagon train. It's like, and I love him for it, but he's very much the epitome of that Western ideal, to the point where it almost gets him killed.
It's human nature. People get set in their ways, and they're less inclined to change. And this movie shows that completely. There are circumstances that make them change for a while, but they frequently go back to who they were beforehand.
Right.
Which is why we constantly have Preacher coming back to be heroic, thinking, oh, time's up, gotta go. Nope, I can't get away yet. It's circumstance that makes him become a partner.
Right. And then it was a bit refreshing, weirdly, to have the sheriff get stabbed. Because in it was the Oxbow incident, we had the one white non-racist character, and he ended up just being right at the end, right? It's like going, everyone should have followed the law, and blah blah blah. And to see the sheriff constantly trying to paddle uphill, trying to navigate the unnavigable, trying to be complicit but still try to talk sense into people, having that inevitably fail, was actually refreshing to watch. It's like, you can't negotiate with people like this. They are too full of hate. You will always lose. There is no centrist position here.
You can only delay at best.
Yes, and as we did, he did delay, and arguably his delay saved that wagon train because it gave Buck time to get there. But so his sacrifice was not completely pointless, but he had to die for the moral center of this film to make sense.
And the fact that the racist gets to go back and easily convinces the deputies that, he said you're in charge and we should go take out the wagon train, and the deputies gleefully agree.
Right. Again, very Oxbow incident, right?
Yeah.
I'm the deputy, so I'm totally empowered to do this. It's like, cool, all right, we're not going to look at this too closely because we get to do what we want.
It's the fact that I love the fact they use the mountainside to their advantage, so they have to fight tactically, given how vastly outnumbered they are.
Right. I love it too, because and I actually made note, like, it felt like High Noon again, where it's they have the advantage of numbers. The only way we can survive this is if we take control of the terrain and literally control the high ground in this case. And the way the shootout is choreographed, you never lose sight of that. At no point in time is it like, the heroic stand where I'll stand up and shoot. And it's always like ducking behind rocks, and you see shots pinging off the rocks. And so, like, you're constantly reminded that if those rocks weren't there, they would be dead within seconds.
Yeah. Which makes me go back and think Lucas stole more from this movie, because when Obi-Wan tells Anakin, don't do it, Anakin, have the high ground, it all comes back to Buck and the Preacher.
So what you're saying is that George Lucas watched Buck and the Preacher and made Star Wars.
Yes. Hands down.
So my argument is Sidney Poitier watched Django and said, I should put a gun in the Bible. If you hide guns and religious things, that's cool.
Oh, I can see that. But they didn't want to drag that coffin around everywhere. They didn't want to drag the coffin up a mountainside, so that's why it became
exactly. So it's like, let's put a pistol in a Bible. That's fine. But again, even that, like the balance of drama and comedy in this movie is so wild because like the preacher pulls out the mysterious, I have a backup gun in my Bible. I've been carrying this whole time. I have a bag, and then he runs out of ammo anyway. It's just like, oh, buddy, you tried.
It's when he stopped. All right, it's when they stopped counting shots when shit gets really serious. Like first, like take a shot here, take a shot there. Then it got really serious. Like, oh shit, it's like, oh,
right.
I love it. Which is why I, as a asshole GM, make my players buy their ammunition and everything else, and I make them keep track of it. I know people say, well, they could roll a luck roll. No, it's a joy on their faces when they go, oh, GMing high. Sorry, you're saying something totally relevant versus me.
I was going to mention, I talked way back at the beginning, we talked about the role of violence and the balance of violence here. This is actually one of the biggest problems I have with the film is because this is the most dramatic violence part of the movie, right?
Yeah.
But because the actual visual violence is so muted because they're trying to emulate that older style, it was actually really hard to tell who was just injured and who was dead throughout this fight. Like when the preacher first got shot, I thought he was just dead. And then I see a movement. Say, oh, okay, no, I guess he's alive. Oh, like 30 seconds later, they cut to a scene where there's a little bit of red on his shirt. I'm like, okay, he's wounded. But I did not know for like half a minute what his state was.
So you say 30 seconds later, when he gets shot, he instantly moves his hand like there's a little red dot on his hand, and you go, oh, and puts it on. So it's there. You're right, though. So when you're saying their player characters, they play by pulp rules, everyone else plays by NPC rules.
Right, and this is up to this point in time, I was able to excuse a lot of it. It's like the protagonists, they have this thing, but like this is the point where it really felt like plot armor,
Yeah.
Especially considering Marcus does get killed with one shot later. Although, granted, again, it is literally a sonic shotgun to the face, so like it's really hard to talk your way out of that one. So like I'm not that mad about it. And there was just a frame or two of red on his face, so like you think the subliminal thing of violence that just showing you a lot of violence. But like again, this had been a Leone film. You would have seen like his head like pulped and like watermelon guts or whatever.
They were just like threw red paint from the side of the screen and splashed him in it.
yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. He was just covered in red paint. But no.
So the reason I stick with pulp too is that like Preacher essentially gets shot twice and it's pretty much down. Sidney Poitier gets shot once and can still sort of shoot, but then they are saved by the indigenous people. That is the only reason they get to live, which is pulp rules, which means you could take a bullet or 3 at most.
And I think that's the other big point. Again, like that's the part I like the least, but also it's a minor quibble in the grand scheme of things because what's actually happening is that, okay, they're not going to last much longer. And throughout this whole fight, we keep getting shots of the tribe just sitting there and just watching, right? And so, like, at some point, they have to intercede, right? That's just how these stories go. But the movie waits to the absolute last minute before it does. And so the fact that none of those characters have speaking parts, you still feel the indecision that they have, right? Because what's brilliant about this is that the chief made a comment of like, we need these guns to protect our land, protect our people. And Buck tries to make the point that we're the same. This wagon train has the exact same concerns you do.
Yeah.
And the chief doesn't buy it. But the way it's done, the way Sensi, his wife, says it, it's a little unclear if she's speaking for him or she's slightly putting a spin on that, you know? And so we don't know what orders he gives to his. We know what she says they have. We don't know what orders the chief actually gives to his scouts. And we just don't know how much of this is them just deciding to intercede. But they're having to watch this massacre happen. And so when they charge down that hill, it very much feels like they have made a decision saying this is enough, not just this is a plot relevance time for us to intercede. And it's all cinematography. It's all body language and how that was shot, not in dialogue, not in anyone saying anything. It's all just how that film was put together. So purely on the director's shoulders.
And then we get the community itself now coming back to take care of them and sort of also save them in the very end.
Right. Yep. Yes, that is a point. Is that once the natives get involved, then the wagon train comes back and they also help, and it just becomes a route. But it's noteworthy that the natives are the one who took that big step.
Yes, because without them, they would both be dead because those dudes already shot them before the community showed up.
Right. Yep.
All right, Eddie. What did you think of this movie? What's your full final thoughts?
Terrible. Why did I watch this? No, I mean it was extremely good film. I enjoyed it, not even as just a Western, but like it was just a good film, right? I really, really enjoyed it. This is the first film I feel like where I'm finally starting to have the Captain America gif of I understood that reference. Because previous films are like, oh, this is a reference to this movie, like, okay, sure, okay. But this one I'm starting to go, oh, this is like this film. Oh, this is like this one. I'm starting to actually see how the previous films we've watched are starting to influence the films we're watching now.
Awesome.
How about you?
It's all right. It's a film. I love this movie. Come on. What there are bits of Haunted West inspired by this movie. Like there's no way I can't not say that. Even if you look at the combat of Haunted West, if I talk almost game mechanics, an average Paragon can take anywhere from maybe 2 to 4 bullets. So it has that pulpy vibe to it that comes somewhat from this in Briscoe County. Some of the magic beats from Haunted West would come from like the beats here, where there is potentially magic, maybe there's not, but it's a love of history poured out on screen by incredibly charismatic acting and someone that wanted to tell actual history in a way that was engaging for audiences. Why would I love anything like that?
Yeah, I completely agree. If anything, the only thing I can say negative about this film is that it has the unfortunate side effect of me liking Red Son a bit less.
High compliment.
It is, right? Because like I like the Red Son, and I was like, oh, this is basically Red Son but better. Okay, well, it's Red Son but better, but it is better,
All right. Then I guess so. Next time we're gonna cover Blazing Saddles. Take a long time to get here, but there's no way we can't not cover Blazing Saddles.
Yeah. So it's funny because like I obviously I know what we're covering after each of these, but like the whole time I was watching Buck and the Preacher, I was going, I always knew Blazing Saddles was supposed to be a Western parody, but how much of it is specifically a Buck and the Preacher parody is now I want to watch it again with that in my head, because I feel like there's more than a percentage of it. There's at least some percentage of Buck and the Preacher in this movie, I feel. So I'm curious as I rewatch it.
Could be. If people want to get in touch with you, where can they do that?
Pugsteady.com. That's my website. I actually just recently updated it because I've been forgetting to update it with all the stuff I've worked on in the past year. So I fixed all that. But you can also find me on Blue Sky under pugsteady.com, or you can go to realmsofpugmire.com. Although I've been debating maybe I need to start combining those websites because it's getting pretty expensive these days to maintain all these websites. How about you?
Now you're shaming me. I still have my Darker Hue website that I haven't updated in multiple years. I guess I should update now to be like Eddie and be cool. So I guess yes, I've updated my website also with everything ever. But you can catch me on Blue Sky at Dark Undercurrent Hue. You can come to the Discord. You can join the Patreon at Harlem Unbounding and get more episodes of journalists that we don't cover here. But I've noticed we've started referencing more without plot.
Yeah.
It's for you to find things out.
So if you want the whole experience, you got it back to Patreon. It's almost like it's a plan. It's not a plan. Not actually a plan. So with that, we will see you next week with Blazing Saddles.